I woke up to the kind of message that makes your whole body go numb. On my phone screen in black and white were the words from my own mom. We changed all the locks. You don't have a house anymore. Stick with me while I tell you what happened, because it's a story that broke me, rebuilt me, and might just make you think twice about the meaning of family. And if it hits you the way it hit me, don't forget to show some support by liking, subscribing, and sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. My mom, Laura, wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, but this was beyond harsh. It wasn't just cold. It was final. I'm 22, barely out of college, still juggling part-time jobs and trying to find my place in the world. I didn't have my own apartment yet, no savings that could keep me afloat for long. And through all that, I always thought of my parents' house as my safety net, the one place that would always be home. That one text tore that illusion apart in seconds. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe she was angry about something small. Maybe it was Richard, my stepdad, being dramatic. I called her right away, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched in my hand, replaying every memory that suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I remembered late nights when I covered the grocery bill because Mom and Richard were stretched thin. I remembered paying part of the electric bill when the lights were about to be cut. I remembered helping fix the leaky sink, patching up the roof, all the things that weren't my responsibility. But I did them anyway, because I thought that's what family did. And yet, here I was being erased from my own home with a single sentence. The confusion started to twist into hurt. Why would she do this to me? What did I do so wrong? I scrolled back through our old texts, desperate for some clue, some warning. There was nothing. Just days earlier, she'd asked me to grab milk on my way home, and I did it without question. That's what stung the most. It wasn't like I had pulled away or stopped caring. I glanced around my room, the one space that still felt like mine. My clothes in the closet, my favorite books on the shelf, the photo of me and Mom on graduation day. All of it was trapped behind doors I no longer had the key to. The realization washed over me slowly but heavy. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't temporary. My own mom had locked me out of her life, and her house for good. And that was the moment I understood that everything I thought was solid could be ripped away without warning. I drove home faster than I should have, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was hammering in my chest the entire drive, but I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe Mom's message was written in anger. Maybe Richard grabbed her phone and thought he was being funny. There was no way my own mother meant what she said. I refused to believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. When I pulled up to the house, everything felt strange. The curtains were closed, the porch light was off even though it was getting dark, and the driveway felt emptier than usual. I parked and stepped out, my legs shaking beneath me. The house I grew up in suddenly felt foreign, like I didn't belong there anymore. I walked up to the front door, my key clutched in my hand, praying it would still work. Before I even reached the lock, the door swung open. My mom stood there, her face cold and hard, and right beside her was Richard, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. He was smirking like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Mom!" My voice cracked. "What's going on? Why would you send me that message?" She didn't even flinch. "Because it's true," she said flatly. "This isn't your home anymore. We need space, and you're not part of this household." Her words cut sharper than the message. Hearing them from her mouth made my stomach twist. I stepped closer, desperate for her to soften, to tell me she didn't mean it. "What do you mean? I've lived here my whole life. I've helped with bills, with groceries. I've done everything I could to support you and Richard when things were tough." My voice shook with every word, tears threatening to spill. Richard let out a short, cruel laugh. "We never asked you to," he said. "You chose to throw your money around. That doesn't mean this place is yours." I felt my face burn, part humiliation, part rage, but mostly heartbreak. I looked back at my mom, hoping she would defend me, or at least show a flicker of guilt. Instead, she just stared at me like I was a stranger standing on her porch. "Please, Mom," I whispered, my throat tight. "I don't have anywhere else to go. Just let me stay until I figure things out. I won't be a burden, I promise." But she only shook her head slowly, her eyes cold. "You need to learn how to take care of yourself. You can't stay here anymore." The door began to close, and panic flooded me. I stepped back, clutching the small bag of clothes I had in my car, the only belongings I could carry. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed in my ears like a final sentence. I sank down onto the doorstep, my tears spilling freely now. The house that once held my laughter, my memories, my childhood, had just pushed me out like I never mattered. And in that moment, I realized I was truly on my own. I spent the next couple of days bouncing between anger and disbelief. I kept replaying that moment at the door, the way Mom looked right through me, the way Richard smirked like he'd won something. I wanted to believe there had to be some explanation, something deeper I just didn't understand. But the silence from them was crushing. No texts, no calls, no answers. Just a wall where my family used to be. It wasn't until I got a call from my younger cousin Emily that the real truth started to come out. She was only 16, still living at home, and she'd always looked up to me like an older sister. Her voice was shaky when she spoke. "Sarah, I probably shouldn't say this, but you need to know. Aunt Laura's been talking about kicking you out for months." My stomach dropped. "What? What are you talking about?" Emily hesitated, then continued. "At the family barbecue in June, she was bragging. She told everyone she was ready for a fresh start, that she didn't want you holding her back any. She said you were too independent, that you made her feel useless." I couldn't breathe for a second. A fresh start? Holding her back? I had worked my entire life to climb out of the mess we lived in. I was the first in the family to graduate college, the one who stayed up studying while working 2 jobs just to cover my tuition. I had scraped by on scholarships and paychecks while she and Richard leaned on me for money every other month. And still, she saw me as dead weight. The words echoed in my head, bragged about it. My mom didn't just plan to throw me out, she celebrated it. She wanted people to know. Emily kept talking, her voice low like she was afraid someone might hear her. "She said you thought you were better than everyone else because of college. She said you'd start looking down on her, and she didn't want that in her house." I didn't believe her then, but now, she trailed off, and I could tell she felt guilty just telling me. Tears burned my eyes, but they weren't the soft kind that came from sadness. These were hot, angry tears. My whole life, I believed my mom's struggles were my struggles. I carried her weight, Richard's weight, the house's weight, because I thought family meant you didn't let each other drown. And yet she saw me not as a daughter, but as competition. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about space, or needing privacy, or me overstaying my welcome. It was about control. She didn't want me rising above the life she chose. She wanted me small, dependent, stuck. And when I started proving I could stand on my own, she decided to cut me down. I hung up with Emily, my chest aching, but my mind clearer than ever. The betrayal wasn't just that she locked me out. It was that she had hated my success all along. And that truth cut deeper than anything else. Jessica's apartment wasn't big, just a 1-bedroom with a tiny couch that sagged in the middle, but it was more of a home than my own house had been in weeks. I laid there at night, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I'd gone from thinking I had a safety net to realizing my own mother saw me as disposable trash. The first few nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Laura's voice telling me, "This isn't your home anymore." It replayed like a cruel echo, mixing with Richard's mocking. My chest would tighten, and I'd sit up, swallowing back tears so I wouldn't wake Jessica. But Jessica noticed anyway. She'd come sit on the floor beside the couch, rubbing my shoulder. "Don't let them win," she whispered one. "You're stronger than this, Sarah. You've been holding them together for years. Now it's time to hold yourself up." Her words dug into me, but at first, I couldn't believe them. I felt humiliated, cast aside like I never mattered. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? How could my own mom betray me like that? One evening, while Jessica was at work, I pulled out an old notebook from my bag. Something inside me needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't just imagined all the ways I had carried that house. I started writing. Every grocery run, every electric bill I paid when the lights were about to be cut off, the hundreds I chipped in for Richard's car repair, the rent I quietly slipped into Mom's account when she said she was short just this month. As I wrote, my pen pressed harder against the page, the ink smudging from the force of my hand. For the first time, I was seeing it all laid out, years of sacrifice from a daughter who was supposed to be cared for, not drained dry. And then I remembered the guilt trips. Mom's voice rang in my ears. "If you really loved me, you'd cover this bill. You don't want us to lose the house, do you? Just help this once, Sarah. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." But once became dozens of times. Helping became expected. By the time I set the notebook down, my hand was sore, but my chest felt different. The shame and sadness were still there, but underneath them, something else was beginning to stir. A quiet, simmering rage. I realized they hadn't just betrayed me by locking me out. They had used me over and over until I finally became inconvenient. And that thought lit a fire inside me that I hadn't felt before. Lying back on the couch that night, I wasn't just broken anymore. I was angry. And anger, I realized, could be the first step toward taking my power back. It was a Saturday afternoon when Jessica's brother, Mark, came over to visit. He was in his final year of law school, always the type to carry himself like he already knew the system better than anyone else. Normally, I would have kept my problems to myself, but Jessica insisted I tell him everything. So I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of coffee, and explained how my mom had locked me out of the house. I told him about all the times I had paid for bills, covered groceries, and even sent money directly to her account to help with the mortgage. Mark listened carefully, not laughing or dismissing me the way I expected. When I finished, he leaned forward. Sarah, you realize this might not just be cruel, it might be illegal. If you contributed consistently to the household, you weren't just a guest. You were essentially a tenant, and tenants can't be evicted without notice. I blinked at him, my heart picking up speed. Wait, what are you saying? That I could actually do something about this? Mark nodded. Exactly. If you can prove your financial contributions, bank statements, receipts, text messages, you might have a case for unlawful eviction. Courts don't take kindly to situations like this. For the first time in weeks, a spark of hope lit inside me. It was small, almost fragile, but it was there. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I felt. Maybe there was a way to fight back. That night, I pulled out my notebook and started digging through everything I had. Old bank statements showed transfers to my mom's account labeled house payment or utilities. Receipts showed the hundreds I'd spent on groceries, not just once, but regularly. I even had text messages from her. Sarah, the bill's due today. Can you cover it? Or, if you love me, you'll help me out this month. Reading them again made my stomach twist. But this time I didn't just feel guilt. I felt evidence stacking in my hands. The process was exhausting. I stayed up late at Jessica's dining table, papers spread everywhere, highlighting and writing notes. My nerves were on edge. Part of me was terrified. What if I took my own mom to court? What if this tore my family apart for good? But then I remembered. She had already torn it apart when she sent me that text. After 2 weeks of gathering everything, I booked a consultation with a lawyer named Mr. Harris. He was older, calm, and professional, the kind of man who didn't waste words. I sat across from him, hands trembling as I slid the folder of documents toward him. He flipped through the pages slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at me. Sarah, this is a very strong case. You have solid proof of your financial contributions, and the way they removed you was unlawful. If you want to move forward, I can help you. For the first time since that text message, I felt something close to power returning to me. My mom had taken away my home, but maybe, just maybe, I could take back my dignity. I never thought I'd be the type of person to show up to my own childhood home with the police standing beside me, but that's exactly what happened. After weeks of ignored texts and calls, I finally had no choice. Most of my belongings were still inside, clothes, books, even personal documents I couldn't replace, and Laura refused to let me step foot in the house. My lawyer told me I had every right to collect my things, but since Laura had made it clear she'd fight me at the door, I needed backup. So there I was, standing at the curb with 2 officers beside me, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The house looked the same as always, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. When Laura opened the door and saw the police, her face twisted in anger. Really, Sarah? She spat. You're dragging strangers into this? You're unbelievable. I kept my voice as steady as I could, even though my hands shook. I just want to get my things, Mom. You left me no choice. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. You're ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in front of my neighbors. Something inside me snapped. Weeks of pain and humiliation boiled over, and before I could stop myself, the words came flying out. Everything I've done for you, Mom. Who paid the bills when you couldn't? Who bought the groceries when the fridge was empty? Who covered Richard's car repairs so he could keep driving to work? Don't talk to me about ungrateful. For the first time, she faltered. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Richard, standing behind her with his arms crossed, stepped in with a mocking laugh. Oh, please, Sarah. You think a few grocery runs make you some kind of hero? You've always acted like you were better than us. I turned to him, my voice cold. Better than people who use their own daughter like a bank account? Yeah, maybe I am. The air between us was so tense I could almost feel it pressing against my chest. Laura's face turned red with fury, and for a second I thought she might slam the door in my face again. But one of the officers stepped forward, his tone firm but calm. Ma'am, she has the legal right to collect her belongings. You can either let her in peacefully, or we'll escort her in. Your choice. Laura's eyes darted between me and the officers. I could see the calculation in her face, the realization that this time, she wasn't in control. With a sharp huff, she stepped aside, muttering curses under her breath. I walked inside, my heart aching as I gathered my things. Every corner of the house held memories, but now it felt poisoned. As I carried the last box out, I glanced back at my mom. Her eyes burned with rage, but beneath it, I saw something else, fear. For the first time, she realized I wasn't going to walk away quietly, and that terrified her more than anything. Sarah sat in the courtroom, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, the family members sitting on Laura's side, glaring, whispering, shaking their heads in disapproval. They thought she was the villain for daring to drag her own mother into court. But Sarah knew better. She knew exactly what Laura and Richard had done, and today, the truth would come out. When the judge called the case, Laura stood tall, chin lifted like she was walking into a church pew rather than a courtroom. Richard smirked beside her, oozing confidence, as though Sarah's little lawsuit would crumble before it even began. But Sarah's lawyer stood calm and steady and announced the charges: unlawful eviction and financial reimbursement. Gasps rippled through the family section. Sarah heard one aunt hiss, "Shameful girl." Another uncle muttered, "She's tearing the family apart." The weight of their condemnation pressed on her chest, but Sarah refused to look away from Laura. She had spent her whole life bowing, apologizing, staying small to keep her mother's approval. Not anymore. Laura tried to get ahead of the narrative. When called to speak, she turned on the waterwork. "She's my daughter, Your Honor. My daughter. And this is how she repays me. After I sacrificed so much for her, she's letting strangers tell her I'm a monster. All I wanted was a little respect." Sarah almost laughed at the performance. It was so predictable. Laura always knew how to twist a room, how to make herself the victim. But this time, Sarah wasn't defenseless. When it was her turn, she stood, voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the only one who sacrificed was me. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. I covered groceries, repairs, and utilities. And when I finally saved a little for myself, they changed the locks and told me I didn't have a home anymore." Her lawyer slid a thick folder across the bench. "Bank records, receipts, payment confirmations," he explained. The judge flipped through them, eyebrows raised. Laura's face darkened, her tears vanishing like mist. "Those were gifts," she snapped. "A child's duty to her mother." But Sarah wasn't finished. She had held on to this moment for months. "And if you think I'm lying," she said firmly, "you can ask Jessica." The doors opened, and Jessica walked in, calm and collected. Sarah's cousin took the stand and testified under oath about the barbecue, about Laura bragging that she didn't need Sarah anymore since Richard was around. The words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. For the first time, Laura looked rattled. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The smugness was gone. Sarah sat back, her pulse steady now. For once in her life, the power wasn't in Laura's hands, it was in hers. And she wasn't letting go. The courtroom was packed when the judge returned to deliver the decision. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, her palms damp against the wooden surface, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Laura and Richard sat across from her, their smug expressions betraying confidence they had clung to throughout the trial. The judge's voice was steady, official, leaving no room for interpretation. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Sarah Matthews. The defendants, Laura Matthews and Richard Collins, are hereby ordered to repay damages for unlawful eviction, as well as reimbursement for the plaintiff's financial contributions to the property. Total restitution will amount to $86,000. A hush fell over the courtroom. The number landed like a thunderclap. Sarah blinked rapidly, trying to process that it was real, that she had won. She had fought her mother in court, and she had won. Across from her, Laura's composure cracked for the first time. Her lips twisted into a snarl, her face drained of color, and her knuckles whitened as she clutched the edge of the table. Richard whispered something hurriedly into her ear, but it only made her scowl deepen. She wasn't in control anymore, and that reality burned her pride like acid. Sarah exhaled a shaky breath. Relief coursed through her veins, but with it came a hollow ache. She hadn't wanted it to come to this. She hadn't wanted to sue her own mother, to parade their broken bond in front of strangers, to win by proving how little her family had cared for her. But they had forced her hand. They had locked her out of the only home she knew, and this was the cost. As the gavel struck, people began filing out of the room. Sarah gathered her folder of evidence, bank statements, receipts, even Jessica's testimony that had tipped the scales in her favor. Each page felt like a scar she'd been forced to show the world. When Sarah stepped outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun blinded her. Then she saw Laura waiting by the steps, arms crossed, her eyes filled with venom. Richard stood beside her, but silent now, his usual arrogance deflated. Laura's voice cut through the noise of the street like a blade. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You think you've won something here? You're not my daughter anymore." Her words dripped with venom, each syllable meant to pierce. Sarah stopped just a few feet away, her own expression calm but firm. For the first time, she didn't shrink beneath her mother's glare. Her voice was steady, her tone final. "No, Mom. You made that choice the moment you sent me that text telling me I didn't have a home anymore." The words hung heavy in the air. Laura's face twisted in fury, but Sarah didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away, her steps steady, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This was the turning point. There was no going back. Sarah slid the final box into the corner of her new apartment, her breath shaky, but filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The apartment was small, the kind of place that might make some people wrinkle their noses, but to Sarah, it was perfect. The pale cream walls, the tiny balcony that overlooked the street, the faint scent of fresh paint. It was hers. No one could change the locks behind her back. No one could text her in the middle of the night to remind her she didn't belong. Here, in this space, Sarah finally belonged to herself. Jessica came in carrying a stack of mismatched mugs, laughing as one nearly slipped from her hand. "Don't you dare let me be the first person to break something in your new place," she joked, setting them down on the kitchen counter. Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. "Those mugs have survived years of hand-washing at Mom's house. They can survive anything." Jessica gave her a knowing look. "Not Mom's house anymore. This is your house." The words sank deep. Your house. Sarah had dreamed of this moment during countless nights spent crying in her car, wondering where she would end up. Now, standing barefoot on her own hardwood floor, she could finally exhale. They spent the afternoon unpacking, blasting music from Sarah's phone. Jessica insisted on hanging a string of fairy lights across the living room, while Sarah arranged her small collection of books on a second-hand shelf. Every object, no matter how ordinary, felt like a declaration. "I made it out. I started again." When the sun dipped low and painted the room in gold, Sarah sank onto the couch. Jessica joined her, handing over a mug of tea. They clinked them together like champagne glasses. "To freedom," Jessica said. Sarah smiled softly. "To freedom." For a moment, they just sat in silence, sipping tea and watching the lights glow against the wall. Sarah's heart ached when she thought of Laura. Her mother's face twisted with rage outside the courthouse, her words sharp as knives. "You're not my daughter anymore." But Sarah understood now. Blood wasn't always family. Family was the friend who carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. Family was the one who made sure you had curtains on the windows, groceries in the fridge, and laughter echoing in the air when everything else felt heavy. "I never thought I'd feel free," Sarah admitted quietly. "But I do. Finally." Jessica leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. "You deserve this. Every bit of it." As night fell, Sarah looked around the tiny apartment with a full heart. It wasn't just 4 walls. It was a beginning. She carried scars, yes, but scars only proved survival. For the first time, Sarah wasn't defined by what her mother had done to her. She was defined by what she had built for herself, piece by piece, box by box, moment by moment. And no one could take that away. The news came to Sarah in the most unexpected way. She was sipping coffee in her little apartment, the one she had built with laughter, secondhand furniture, and Jessica's warm touches, when a neighbor who still kept tabs on her family mentioned casually, "Did you hear? Laura and Richard lost the house." Sarah blinked, stunned for a moment. "Lost the house," she echoed. "They couldn't keep up with payments. Bank took it back. They're staying with some distant cousin for now," the neighbor replied, shaking her head. A storm of emotions passed through Sarah: shock, a strange pang of pity, and then a heavy wave of poetic justice. The very walls that had once shut her out, the locks her own mother had boasted about changing, were no longer theirs to guard. That evening, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months: Mom. Sarah let it ring twice, her chest tightening. Then, against her better judgment, she picked it up. "Sarah?" Laura's voice cracked on the other end, frail and desperate. "Please listen to me. We need help. Richard and we've lost everything. We can't pay rent, we can't." Sarah stayed silent, gripping the phone so hard her knuckles whitened. "You're our daughter," Laura pleaded. "No matter what happened, you can't just leave us like this. Please. Lend us something, just until we get back on our feet." For a long moment, Sarah could hear only her own heartbeat. Then she inhaled slowly and spoke with a steadiness she hadn't known she possessed. "I don't have a mom anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Laura's breath hitched, like she had been slapped. Before she could respond, Sarah pressed end call. Her hands trembled for a second, but instead of crumbling, she felt lighter. It was as though the final thread binding her to the pain of her past had been cut clean. She walked to the balcony of her small apartment. The city lights shimmered below, alive and free, a reflection of her own spirit. She thought about how far she had come, from being the unwanted burden cast out of her own childhood home, to standing on her own feet, unshaken by their downfall. Family, she realized, was not the people who shared your blood, but the ones who shared your heart. Jessica, her new circle of friends, even the quiet comfort of her apartment, these were her anchors now. As the cool evening breeze brushed against her face, Sarah stood tall, no longer weighed down by the scars her mother had carved into her. Their fresh start had collapsed without her, and for the first time, she knew she was free. They had changed the locks to shut her out, but Sarah had built a door of her own, one they would never walk through again. Do you think Sarah was right to finally cut her mother off for good, or should she have given her one last chance? I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.